What's up, fellow gamers? Phreak here, and patch 11.2 is already live by the time not only I'm recording this, but the time you're watching it as well. Would not trust day one public win rates, so if you've seen them, probably don't trust them. Regardless, though, I had been taking the last 2 days off because I hadn't had a day off in a while, and so I just didn't do rundown. But I'm doing it today. If that's too late for you, that's fine. If you're enjoying it, that's great. Let's get into the patch itself. Some good stuff, some stuff that's I don't know if there's anything I actually dislike in this patch. There is, but we'll get into that later. Okay, so 11.2, a lot of stuff going on here. You can, look at all this stuff going on. There's some cool item updates. Some that I think are actually pretty interesting, so hopefully those actually bear out well. Viego's coming, that's pretty exciting. Akali is getting a revert on her fairly recent buffs to Q cost. What's interesting is, I know some of the logic I had seen internally was that they think this will nerf good Akalis more than bad Akalis. And this is interesting to me because normally costs tend to be more constrained for weaker players, right? Because they run out of mana and stuff like that. I could see an argument for this not being as true for energy, where like combat patterns for energy champs can be difficult, and like if a good player can squeeze out a third Q anyway, this doesn't really help very much. Or what is it? Sorry. Like a good player would be able to squeeze out a third Q, whereas a bad player couldn't. That kind of stuff. So, if a bad player is only getting 2 Qs anyway, like regardless if this is buffed or nerfed, then this doesn't nerf bad players. But if a good player could have gotten Q3 with the resets and done the combo properly, now you can't. I can see that logic. I think there is maybe an argument, and hey, maybe we can see down the line that indeed, Akali's going to lose more win rate in like Diamond 2 plus than in, Gold through Plat, but I don't know. I think it's interesting. But yeah, I mean, Akali is, mechanically, like in actual sort of total win rate, more or less fine. No, it's not to say that Akali can't be theoretically OP, but, enough players who play Akali are bad at her that she's not that good. She's getting banned all the time. She's frustrating and get all that. But either way, whatever. Next up, Azir gets 1 second off the Q cooldown. Oh yeah, by the way, I forget if I showed it, but here's the cost difference, right? Pretty meaningful. Azir gets 1 second off his Q cooldown, which is, maxed first, so you get the full power of the buff pretty early on. Azir has really, really, really high mana in the early game. He's one of the highest in the game, if not the single highest, which makes him, I think, able to spam this quite a lot. This ends up being a pretty big buff. Azir doesn't have like the worst mana cost constraints, so I think he ends up being in a pretty decent spot. I think he's still fairly low win rate for solo queue because he's Azir. He's never going to be, but cool enough buff, I suppose. Next up is Caitlyn getting some attack damage growth to the tune of about 0.4. So here are the numbers. It is not a lot, right? It's 7 AD by level 18. This is definitely not a big deal. Ultimately, keep in mind that every AD carry build is going to buy a lot more attack damage, so her DPS is not up 4 to 6% in the late game. If you said, hey, Caitlyn, you deal 4% more damage, I mean, that would be an absurd buff. It'd be like 2% or something. I think that's probably like the tune of how much you actually get out of that much damage amp. But this is, probably sub 1%. You're going to have other items going on. You're going to have runes and your Doran's Blade and Kraken Slayer or whatever going on. And, it's not going to be as big of a deal as you might think. So, pretty small buff. But again, AD carries are usually within 2% of 50%. So, if you're keeping everyone within 48 and 52, then you're kind of fine. Darius getting a buff that is smaller than you might think, 10 to 25 attack damage off of his passive. Yes, he gets that much AD by fully stacking the passive. Most of the attack damage is backloaded, and Darius's base AD is like very, very high as well, to the tune of like 150-ish almost at max level. He has a lot. So this is not maybe as big of a deal as you might think, but hey, his total AD with no items, with his full stack passive is this right here. Does it matter? Yes. Will there be kills he's going to miss because of that? Yes. Keep in mind that one thing you could do is like this almost always feeds into his ult damage, right? He almost always is going to get this, 27 more attack damage or 27 less attack damage when ulting, and so his ults do less damage. Like, this actually is fairly wide-reaching or far-reaching because he has aggressive AD ratios everywhere, and because he so often wants to hit 5-stack bleed. It would even affect the bleed damage itself because the bleed damage has an AD ratio on it. So there is a lot that this actually turns into. And it is actually a fairly meaningful cut. So this actually should be a pretty sizable nerf to Darius. Again, not gigantic. This only matters when you 5-stack the passive. Very frequently when Darius 5-stacks the passive, that champion's dead anyway. So it's not, oh my gosh, the sky is falling, but it is a moderately sized nerf that's pretty solid. So Dr. Mundo is getting his Q refund to be a bit nicer, and the E to do 1% max health more damage, and his ult to refund 10% more max health. Now, I have some tech for you guys, okay? I have some tech for you guys. And you can see it here. Dr. Mundo should be maxing E first. Dr. Mundo should be maxing E first. Now, you might be saying, Phreak, what are you talking about? And I'll say, look, I looked at Dr. Mundo's solo queue win rates, and I looked at his most common and, highest win rate skill orders. By far, E max is his highest win rate, and not in any way his most common. This works for both top and jungle, by the way. Now you might say, Phreak, that's not the whole story. Sure, Dr. Mundo gets a bunch of magic resist based on his E rank, which means if Dr. Mundo is against magic damage champions, which he's supposed to be good against because he gets free magic resist, and he's maxing E, which is good against magic champions because he's getting free magic resist, it would be high win rate. And that's true. And so then I looked at Mundo's win rate against AD champions, and E max was still the higher win rate. So checkmate. Dr. Mundo should be maxing E. So max E, and you'll have a way better time playing the game. By the way, no one maxes E. If you max E on Dr. Mundo, your win rate goes up like 4%. Dr. Mundo is, if you build him correctly, objectively overtuned. Instead of objectively a dog champion, who is garbage in top lane and in jungle, Dr. Mundo is objectively overtuned if you max E. They buffed his E, they buffed his R. You should really, really, really try to play this champion properly. I want to point out that somehow I did the math wrong here. I know how I did the math wrong here. Hang on, I can fix it. It's pretty quick. There we go. Much better. All right. So, yes, E does a lot more damage. You can see that, doing something like 1% max health is a really solid 20% damage increase, which is... Something went wrong here, I feel like. I'm not sure. Okay, here's what I did, I think. So, the E has two parts to it. It gives him bonus attack damage, and then it gives him percent health damage on top. On, the headbutt itself. This is just doing the max health damage part of it. This is just the on-hit first hit, and not the 100-something attack damage Dr. Mundo gets for 5 seconds for auto-attacking, which, by the way, would be part of the initial headbutt, but I'm just not including it here. It doesn't really matter either way. Again, max E first. It does this much more damage than the headbutt compared to last patch, but also just getting a 100-something attack damage is really valuable, and it makes you duel a lot better. So max E. All right. Next up is Elise, who was doing a bit too well. Has been one of the best performing junglers this entire season, basically, and they're finally nerfing her. So they're nerfing her melee Q damage by 20, right? This is one of her, I guess, 3 damage spells, kind of. I mean, the Spiderlings, the W attack speed kind of count as well, but either way, here is Elise's melee Q damage. So, right, the base damage exists if you're at full health, and it's a pretty meaningful hit, of course. If you're at 25% health remaining, so you have 3/4 of your health missing, the melee Q, and the melee Q does percent missing health damage onto it. And so it's this much damage instead. Obviously, rank 1 is unchanged, so it doesn't matter. I'm using Elise as the example champion for a health bar. She has pretty normal melee champion health. It's not anything too outlandish. But you can kind of see that the base damage actually does a lot of the damage here, right? So this is when you're missing 1,500 health and doing, I forget if it's 8 or 10% or whatever of that, and it's only 1/3 of the ability's damage. So for anyone who says oh, it's not a very big nerf, whatever, Elise, it's even against your primary targets that you're trying to execute later on in the game, this is still not the base damage is still most of the damage of the ability. Just to kind of be clear about that, right? It's also why, from what I've seen, Riot tends to be way too shy about their AP ratios on percent health abilities. Not that they need to be high. The point of an AP ratio is to let a champion scale. And if a champion has a percent health damage ability, it already scales by itself. But I'd be willing to bet that most percent health abilities actually fall off compared to flat damage abilities because their ratios are so lackluster. This is something that I can actually, run numbers on and test at another point in time, but not right now. Either way, again, here's the numbers. Meaningful damage nerf to 1 over 3 damage abilities. Ivern gets 0.1 off the shield AP ratio, which was already there, but now it's... it was only in the tooltip, so now it's actually a real nerf here as well. Okay, so a second nerf to Ivern, which they meant to do, because Ivern was definitely still overtuned off the patch. Makes sense. LeBlanc gets another 5 health growth and a little bit of mana off the second ranked ability. So here's your health growth. LeBlanc has very, very high health now, which, I'm a little bit saddened by, just because, I would like to see if there's a way to, clamp ranged champions to, around 2,000. It's not that big of a deal. LeBlanc does go into melee range a fair bit, but it's also so elusive that it still feels weird having her so durable. Again, it's kind of whatever. I'm not actually mad about it or anything. As far as the Q mana cost, down by 20 at max rank by level 13 is going to be felt a fair bit. Yeah, I mean, this is it's a late game LeBlanc buff to make her feel better about, doing split pushy stuff and surviving the side lane Akali. We go on to Maokai, who is overtaking League of Legends as an AP support with Imperial Mandate, which is also getting nerfed, by the way. This is going to be felt quite a lot. Maokai's going to he's going to lose a lot of win right here, mostly from the mana cost and the Mandate, not so much from the AP ratio nerf. But mana cost is the same at rank 1, so if you're not maxing saplings and you're not building AP, Maokai is entirely unnerfed, which is completely fine. Otherwise, though, yes, mana cost constraints. You are going to feel this fairly quickly. Yes, Maokai levels late. Level 9 comes in very late into the game. Maokai support does. So you're looking at kind of this for, a lot of the meaningful interactions of the game. And honestly, yeah, you can, if your opponents are smart about, just hugging the other side of the lane, you're not really getting any damage out of the E, and you're just sitting there not earning gold income, which means if you're playing against good players, you're not really going Spell Thieves. You're doing Relic Shield, and you have no mana regen at all. And that means you're going to feel this even worse. As far as the ability power ratio is concerned, again, it's really lukewarm. So this is the amount of damage that a sapling deals when not in brush to a champion. When not amplified, I believe, right? This is just here's the damage in the tooltip. Now, in this case, the base damage of a sapling is 150. It's 25, or it's 125. It's either 125 or 150. I know it's 25. It goes up at 25 per rank. I forget the rest of it. I could scroll over. I don't want to. In this case, about half the damage is indeed carried by the AP ratio, both in the early game and the late game. Now, this is, of course, with 100 ability power, adding an extra 1% to the damage. But you can see that, yeah, okay, every 100 AP you buy deals 1% less damage than before. So at 200 AP, it's 2% less damage. At 300 AP, it's 3% less damage. This is not a nerf, right? This barely does anything. Right? For the ratio being cut down by 20%, right? The ratio got cut by 20%. So every 100 ability power, we lose 1.3% of our damage. You get the AP ratio in half, and you would lose 4% of the damage, right? This is 20% cut to the AP ratio. Does nothing to the champion's damage. Again, percent health AP ratios are very, very bad in this game. Nocturne gets 2 seconds off the Q and a solid 10 seconds off of the ultimate for cooldowns. So the Q cooldown can definitely help with jungle clearing, can help with wave clear in the mid lane or top lane there as well, of course. But that's just a flat 20% off, so that's easy to see. As far as the ult cooldown, I mean, obviously this is it was already very short, but it's still very short. 10 seconds off the first one is going to matter a fair bit. It's kind of weird to say that this one matters more than the one down here, but realistically, it is so hard to be in scenarios where you're going to use this. Also, it's hard to be level 16 as a jungler in the first place, so this is almost not text. But this is going to be felt a fair bit. This is solid. This will bump win rate, as with the jungle clear. Pretty good stuff. Nunu has incredibly, incredibly low health for a jungler. I am curious if Nunu's armor and MR is very high, and that's why we keep seeing his health getting lowered, because he's just baseline too tanky because his armor MR are inflated. I don't know if that's true, but it's a thought that I have. It may just be that, look, Consume is just at will health, so he's just too tanky. And, his ult has a really big shield on it, so he's just too tanky. And, if you're going to give a champion places to be tanky, it's more interesting if it's on his spells than on his base stats. So, I accept that. But, I mean, Nunu has really, really, really low base health. For a melee champ with no escapes, this is really, really low. Sub 550 at 1, sub 2000. Like, Leblanc has more health than Nunu does at all points in time. This is why the video I put out, I don't know, a year ago at this point was like, hey, I really wish champions would just have the same armor and MR so that health bars could be different, because Nunu is objectively tankier than LeBlanc, based on if you multiply health by armor MR. Like, that's still true, and health bar doesn't say it. And I think that's a miss. That's all. But yeah, obviously, small nerf, great. He's definitely overtuned. Could use more. The 5 boost probably matters a fair bit. I'm pretty sure that does feed into Snowball. Either way, he's still going to be on the strong side. Like, there's no way this is, like, a giant buff, and now Nunu is, like, underpowered, so good champ. There's some self-healing changes. Umbral Dash, well, basically, the first change is this. World Ender's self-healing buff got cut by 40%, which is a pretty big deal. And so to make that up, Umbral Dash now forcibly just updates its healing amount instead of multiplying through the self-healing. You'll see the numbers are not that far apart. So here is what it means to get 40% less healing. Keep in mind that if you gain 100 health, instead of getting 100, you gain 150. Instead of getting 150, you gain 130. So the amount of actual healing gained is cut from 150 to 130, which is 13% less healing. It's different from like what lifesteal would be, where instead of getting 12 health per auto, you're getting 10 health per auto, or vice versa, which is actually an increase of 20% or whatever. This is a decrease of 13 to 20% here, because that's really how the math works. So Atrox heals for about 15% less during the ultimate. Okay. Here is the other part that, you maybe care about, which is how much E healing is actually happening, E plus R. So in 11.1, it was the E rank times this, and these are the numbers that you got. Look at that, they're very pretty. Now it's hard-coded, so it's this. So what we can see is, in a lot of cases, right, like we could do like a very simple comparison, and just like, hey, but really though, exactly how different are these? Wait, what? Oh, right, yeah. It's, right, so, right, how much has this changed compared to how much has this changed? And then, we could like actually highlight this to have like some text. And we can see that, yeah, it's actually, right, it's better than if they did nothing, is what I'm trying to say here. This patch note is a buff because it's better than if they had just said, screw it, take this number. Because I guess they didn't want Atrox to feel that bad. Actually, I mean, I guess here's a question I have. And does this happen and then it's multiplied again? Like, does this double dip? I don't know the answer to that. If it double dips, this is like clearly overtuned as hell, right? Like, this is clearly way too good if it double dips. And so that feels like it shouldn't be the case, because this would be just way, way, way too much. But, they nerfed this by less than they nerfed this. Sure, okay. Which I think is also kind of fair, because, the really abusive stuff is, Gore Drinker and someone else's Summon or Heal and, all the other stuff getting really absurd. So I'm glad that they are, moving Atrox away from, I mean, he's going to use Gore Drinker still, but lowering that part of it and just making the, like, kit-based sustain more valuable. Because Gore Drinker has no gameplay, really, right? Like, you just dash into them and then hit a button on your keyboard. Atrox, like, wants to stab with his sword. He wants to land sweet spots. Like, it requires some level of action and target selection, as opposed to just, like, I pressed one. So I'm glad that the kit is going in this direction. Definitely Atrox is seeing a lot of pro play as a result. Olaf is getting a flat 2% more lifesteal. Keep in mind you max this last, so it's, for it to become 16 for the vast majority of the game. The self-healing amp is going down to the tune of eventually... 3/6 becomes 2/6, so 2/3 as much if you're at 5 HP. At most points in time, this is still a nerf. Olaf is definitely one of the strongest performing junglers, so good to see that one going down. Senna is... they actually almost did something even bigger than this for preseason, which was loosening Senna's hatred of attack speed by making her base attack speed ratio much, much higher. Now... there is a decent chance they did not nerf her attack speed per level when this happened. Right. Because as soon as you change the attack speed ratio, like, this multiplies your attack speed growth. Like this is the number that everything multiplies off of. Every single thing in the game multiplies off of. So if they didn't nerf Senna's attack speed per level, she's just gaining a ton of DPS. In fact, she's gaining. This will not, based on the way they code the game, this will not affect her level 1 attack speed. So everything but level 1 attack speed is multiplied by this. But it does multiply, and she gains like 4 or like 5 something % attack speed per level. She gains a lot. Her actual attack speed growth stat is very, very, very large. So she's going to get a lot out of leveling up, which means this is actually a very big buff to farm Senna. Because farm Senna actually might buy Berserker's Greaves. Probably not, but it's 50% better than before to buy Berserker's Greaves. She's getting 50% more attack speed on level up. She's getting 50% more damage from level up because she's getting AD from souls, not AD from levels. That's a pretty big deal. And then as more buffs to support Senna, they're gonna drop like 1/4 more souls. The souls are worth 5 more gold a piece. This is a lot of gold. The designer wrote that they expect this to be 350 gold roughly during the laning phase. So Senna gets another 10 AD as well as this going on. And then I'm a big fan of this, by the way. AP ratio buffs to Piercing Darkness. I would be very happy if they could make AP Senna viable. Because essentially, as far as I can tell, Senna's attack damage ratios scale her damage, which is good. And her AP ratios scale her shielding and healing. And they do not cross over, which is a very good thing. I don't think the AP ratios are good enough for this to be good. Like, I would like to see a world where Ardent Censor was buyable on Senna. I don't believe it is. Where Shrelia's was buyable on Senna. I don't believe it is. I think Riot could go a lot harder on Senna's AP ratios, and I think they should do that. Because right now I think AP Senna is unviable. Now, I might be wrong here, but if I am right about AP Senna being unviable, they should be a lot more bullish in buffing AP ratios, because why not make it a viable build to play Healy Senna and not, forcibly going Lethality Senna every game. What's kind of fun is Senna's Q now adds attack stack to Kraken Slayer. I believe you probably should still never go Kraken Slayer Senna. That said, I haven't looked at the win rate. There's a chance it's actually not the complete worst thing ever, because, hey, they buffed her attack speed scaling, and she has so much range that she might be able to use it. It's a possibility. I don't think it's the case, but, maybe. Who knows? Either way, these are very big buffs. These are really, 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 really meaningful buffs to Senna. I don't have numbers on them because most of them aren't really mathable. Shaco gets 10 flat damage on backstab, which is a per target individual cooldown. Applies on his autos, applies on his E. Also not something I mathed. Sorry. Little small bump to Shaco damage. I don't think he's like terribly retuned or anything, so should be fine. Next up, this is one I'm worried about. Soraka is getting quite a bit more out of Star Call healing and a little bit more out of Astral Infusion healing. So Star Call heals her. It also heals her teammate if she lands W on a teammate. I did not. Oh, here's Olaf's Lysa. By the way, I forgot to show this up to you. Okay. So, just on a whim, I took both of these and said you max them second. That's not the case for both at the same time, obviously, but I just wanted to do it because, based on what lane you're playing and how you're playing it, you might not max either of these first. Whatever, it doesn't matter, right? Here's rank 1, here's rank 5. So yeah, I mean, pretty, sizable, moderate buff to W healing. I mean, this is reasonable. Sure. It's going to, elevate her win rate. Support Soraka is going to be a little bit stronger. Cool beans. This part is really scary. Now, I will say they had some really good nerfs to Soraka a while ago, which nerfed her mana pool. It nerfed her stat growth. It made her much more gankable, and it really lowered her Q wave clear. Now, as long as her Q wave clear is trash, she will probably not be a good mid or top laner. Yes, she heals herself for more, and indeed, this is a lot of healing, but I'm not convinced that lane Soraka is going to be any good. Bot lane Soraka, like as a farm champion, maybe. Like that's a real possibility. But I think solo lane Soraka, much less likely. The nice thing about support lane Soraka is you have, or bot lane farm Soraka is you have somebody heal, so like Soraka Pike or something, or some other kind of fighter type like a Set, who's like happy to get in there and do stuff. But also someone to help you wave clear, right? Someone to help push the waves down because, it's tough to do on farm Soraka. So, I think the real win of this patch is bot lane farm Soraka. I think support Soraka is fine as well. I'm not convinced solo lane's going to be any good. Buffs to Trundle. I looked at Trundle's jungle win rate. Most people max W. Higher win rate is maxing E. This is actually further incentive to not max W second. because you're getting more of it up front anyway. The more attack speed you have, the less 10% increased attack speed matters. You still max Q first, 5% more AD ratio on that. So here's the Q damage. You know, small damage buff. The more AD you have, the more this is a 5% buff. The more base ability, the less it is. But yeah, here's the attack speed over the course of time. Again, assuming you're maxing a second, which is, capping it out right here. Again, you should not max a second. You should max your pillar. And getting 30% attack speed at rank 1 makes you more likely to just max pillar instead. Trundle is definitely sub 50, even with pillar max, and could use the help. So here you go. Varus, I love this line. 40 mana per level is the mana per level I want every champion League of Legends to have. Every single one. I'm going to keep saying it every time I say this, because if there's ever a designer who watches this video, please just keep going for 40 mana per level. And if you ever want to nerf Varus at some point in time, put his base mana at 320. Just saying. So mana growth, and then 20, 10, 0 seconds off the R cooldown. Varus, definitely. I really pushed that I thought Varus would be good after the prior set of changes. I was wrong. He is not doing all that well. Also, lethality Varus and W second Varus have basically the same win rate. So max W second versus max E second are pretty much the same. Turns out that because you get all of your cooldowns back, triggering three blobs of blight and getting percent health damage is more valuable. So max W is still pretty solid. Makes sense. I get it. But yeah. Either way, here is his mana pool afterwards. Pretty sizable mana pool increase. Obviously, you're not going to get this much mana, because you're not getting level 18 in most games, but still going to be felt. This is still half an ability, one full ability. That's going to matter. It's going to mean something. It also means if you go Muramana, you're getting a bit more, getting another 120 mana on that. So 2.5% of that is, 25 to 30-ish, solid. 2.5 to 3 attack damage and on-hit damage, which is also not trivial. So, not horrible there either. You may still go Muramana, which is cool. Here is the R cooldown. Again, most games you don't get level 16 plus on an 80 carry, so it's just pure money, Yeah, I mean, this is a pretty solid buff. If we're going to call those cash or trash, it's definitely cash. This is good stuff. Next up, Zoe has more things to steal. Randuin's Locket, Turbo Chem Tank, Shrelia's, Yomu's, Gorge Ranker, Stridebreaker, Prowler's Claw, Minion Spell Drops. No longer includes Redemption. Thank you, Riot. It only took you 3 years. Good job. Nice little bug fixer to put the actual item on cooldown. All right. No longer has, yeah, great. So good interaction with having the item and then using it as a stat shard. Cool stuff. Spell shard. Next up, very large buff to Essence Reaver. You might have seen, the chart down below. I want you to guess percentage-wise how much more mana this is. Like, is it 10% more mana, 20% more mana, 100% more mana? Like, where is it? What do you think it is? Cool. It's this much. This is using Varus as our example champion. Varus has, newly minted this much mana. He also has, pretty reasonable AD carry AD. It's 61 plus 3 per level or something like that. It's reasonable. And so you get 100% of your total attack damage. Sorry, 100% of your base attack damage plus 40% of your bonus attack damage. Which is, so it's 60 plus, and then Essence Reaver gives 50 AD. So 60 plus 20. It's 80 or something like that. Then you get 40% of that number, which is, 32-ish, right? There's some rounding and stuff. It's 55 AD, and he has 61 base AD, so here's the real numbers. Now, you, of course, don't get Essence Reaver at level 1, right? So we're really starting around here. Even if you are getting Reaver at level 5 first, you're really probably buying it after, Kraken Slayer or something, or Gale Force. You're really getting it around here. But if you had that, you would have, Kraken Slayer mana, so, it'd be something but also, plus, let's call it, 25, and it's oh, yeah, okay. If I have a Kraken Slayer, it's that much, and it's even more than that, right? So this is a incredibly large amount of extra mana. This is enough to actually matter. I was seeing, Essence Reaver second, and it was when you cast a spell, refund 20 mana, and I'm but my spell costs 75, and I have to press 2 at the same time because I'm Sivir and I'm pressing QW, and so I spent 185 mana and I got 20 back. What are you doing, Riot? These are numbers that are now in the realm of normalcy and actually scale up meaningfully well. Good. Thank you, Riot. This is now a real amount of mana back. Much, much better. Thank you. Essence Reaver, this was actually, I think, one of the things that I really missed in like the initial patch rundown for preseason, is the amount of mana you got back and the hit rate was just so abysmal that this item was trash from a mana sustain perspective. And it's why you just went Muramana instead. Like, Sivir's best build, by the way, was Gale Force Manamune and just skip Reaver. I mean, you could go Reaver like third just for some CDR, but like, you just went Manamune and that actually solved your mana problems. So now Reaver is a real consideration, and that's a good thing. So good job, Riot. Gale Force gets 30 seconds back on the cooldown. Good nerf. Right, Riot baited everyone to finally buying Gale Force, and now they know it's good, they can nerf it back to where it was before. They can go from there. Yeah, good job. Mandate now finally goes on cooldown on the initial application of your slow. So if you have a low cooldown slowing ability, like let's say you were, Riley's Cassiopeia, every E would trigger Imperial Mandate. If you were, because I believe the cooldown is longer than 4 seconds, if you have a bunch of ability haste on Ashe, every volley would trigger Imperial Mandate. It's real good. Now, I've heard people say really dumb things like, yes, you buy Mandate on Maokai, and look how busted it is. You get the damage on every... No, it's not damage on every trigger. The game tracks, like, sources of damage and doesn't let the exact same ability trigger multiple times the same champion. So, like, Poison Trail ticks 4 times a second. It does not trigger Imperial Mandate 4 times a second. There is a mandatory internal cooldown before it does that again, which is why, like, Cassiopeia Q doesn't just trigger a Mandate 3 times. Or, like, Karthus Defile doesn't just trigger Mandate twice per second on every champion in the team fight. Or Fiddlesticks Ultimate doesn't just trigger Mandate 8 times per champion for the entire... It's like, that's not how these abilities work. Things like Imperial Mandate trigger once per initialization of spell per champion, with a cooldown so that, like, yes, if you're under Poison Trail for like 15 seconds, you'll get more than 1 Mandate proc. That's how they work. But anyone who could apply Mandate reliably and, kind of was a Riley's user, it was just like, oh, here's just 90 ability power, the item, right? And then here's a burst eventually. So now it goes on cooldown initially. So it's, if you ever did hit like a bunch of different Maokai saplings, each sapling would explode on you and deal Mandate damage. That's gone. This definitely nerfs volley spam Ashe a bunch. That might just be gone at this point. This doesn't do a ton to nerf things like Singed, just because the cooldown is not that far apart anyway, and you weren't usually in Poison Trail for that much. But it's going to matter, right? If you were chasing Singed around, your teammates weren't proccing, you're just running away from this guy with Riley's on, like, you were getting Mandate, at the internal retick cooldown. Now you're going to have to only get it on the, mandatory Mandate cooldown. So it is going to still affect those builds, of course. Kraken Slayer no longer, or now actually applies on-hit modifiers for champs who on-hit too much. I know one of the things about true damage is true damage tends to, like, ignore rules, but true damage's point is that it ignore rules around armor and MR and damage reduction. It should not ignore rules about kits, so I'm glad to see these things happen. Shirelia's is now not a trash item. Okay, so same total cost. Item updates, so it's Kindle Gem plus Bandle Glass instead of Kindle Gem plus Fairy and Moonplate. It has less health. It has no move speed, but it has 40 ability power and some mana regen. So, I mean, Riot's saying, hey, by the way, this is actually an enchanter item. And that's fine. So here's Shirley's before. It was horribly not gold efficient. Holy moly. Let's just do this real quick to see how much you're paying for it. Obviously, a lot, and then not as much. Now, you could argue that move speed is underpriced. And, this is worth more than 200 gold. I would disagree with that, but that's okay. You could say that mana regen is overpriced, and this is not 250 gold worth of that. And I would, for what it's worth, probably prefer an item with 5 moves speed 50 regen than 100 regen. To be clear, that's probably true. Because, it probably is true, to be fair. In terms of practical applications for a lot of stuff. But that said, here's 40 ability power out of nowhere. That makes up for everything. Absolutely everything. Now, yeah, you're not going to feel amazing buying this on Taric, although you do have AP ratios. You're not going to feel good about this on Braum. You're not going to feel good about this on Nautilus. But, one of the things that Riot did, we can scroll down the line a little bit later, and it's going to be okay for them. So Shirelia's is well and truly now an enchanter item. This stat profile looks very good. This cost looks very good. This efficiency looks very good. And this active looks very good. Shurelia's is definitely on the menu now. Gigantic buff for the item. This thing looks great. Next thing that Riot did was they buffed Stoneplate a little bit. Cool, that's nice. They took a bunch of assassin items and lowered them by 200, 1 to 200 gold. You're seeing Serpent's Fang and Umbral are 200 gold cheaper and have 5 less attack damage. 5 AD costs 175 gold, so this is a slight efficiency up for both these things. Instead of serrated Caulfields, it's serrated Longsword. I believe this would have been too much stats otherwise, because serrated Dirk, I believe, has 30 AD on it. And Caulfields has 25, so this had to happen. But yeah, you're paying 800 gold for the ward reveal, and a bit more lethality on the item. Serpent's Fang, just outright 200 less gold, 5 less AD. Again, slightly more efficient. You are paying less gold for the stats. It's not as slot efficient in a full build, but it's also a counter item, so I kind of like the idea of counter items being cheaper. Like, I actually really, really do agree with counter type items being like 2,600 gold. Same with Chainsword going down to 2,600 gold as well. 50 health would cost you 133 gold, so going down by 100 gold, but getting 133 less gold worth of health would be a nerf to the item if I'm not doing my math wrong. Because it's 400 gold for 150, so yeah, 133 gold per 50. It is getting, so this is actually a nerf to Chainsword. It's a buff to these two, though. Okay. Marksman Legendaries. 5 attack speed for 100 gold. That is... it's 5 attack speed for free. It's not for 100 gold. Wait, no, it is. Wait, Zeal, Dagger, 850. Zeal, Dagger, 950. Yeah, okay. So, if you want to get 12 attack speed, you spend 300. Which means if you want to get 15 attack speed, you have to spend more than 300. So giving you 5 attack speed for 100 gold is a buff. Am I right? Like, I know my brain is being foggy, but the things I said was true. We'll move on. Pretend I said something smart. Do the math yourself. I'm sorry. Not my day. Here's the fun stuff, though. They're updating tank mythics. I'm going to probably not read these too much, but let's move forward. Okay, so Sunfire Aegis, instead of ability haste, is now tenacity and slow resist per legendary item. So I actually did somewhat agree with the idea of Sunfire Aegis is the damage tank item, and so you buy it, you frontline, you get ability haste, so you can like spam your abilities more, and in you go. I can also really buy the case that tenacity slow resist and makes sense on Sunfire Aegis, because all you're trying to do is stick to them for your Sunfire to deal damage, right? Because the special upgrade of Aegis, I know I just said Aegis and Aegis, they're both acceptable. I'm going to go back and forth because I can. Sticking to them is a DPS stat. Like, the only unique stat on this item is, in fact, the extra burn damage. That's what you're paying for. You're not paying for the slow. You're not paying for engage. You're paying for, I want to stick to you and just burn you down. And so there's an argument to say, look, you don't need your abilities to carry your damage. You just need to stick to them. And so I actually buy this. This is still a stat that I think lines up with the idea of the item. That stat, by the way, got moved to Turbo Chem Tank. You have ability haste for this. Chem Tank is arguably a CC button, and tanks often have CC abilities on their kit, so I think ability haste actually makes sense on Chem Tank as well, in terms of this is the lockdown item, right? I engage, I get onto people, I turbocharge, I get in there. So what they did, by the way, is they lowered the cost of these items by 400 gold. They then, got rid of about 400 gold worth of stats in terms of 25 less armor, 25 less MR, but they gave them 5 ability haste, which means every single one of these items has the same health, the same armor, the same MR, and the same ability haste. What you are paying for are the unique passive, the different unique passive, and then more money for the Sunfire extra burn unique passive. Sunfire might have slightly more health than the other items. I'm not sure anymore. It might have slightly more HP, but not to the same efficiency. I didn't jot that one down. So here's Frostfire and Chem Tank before and after. And as I mentioned, unless I'm doing some of the math wrong here, which I don't believe I am. So here's Frostfire going from 25 armor to 50 armor to 25 armor is 500 less gold worth of armor, right? And in the case of Turbo Chem Tank, it is 450 less gold worth of magic resist. It is also 125 gold more of ability haste. So, for a 400 gold haircut, this is theoretically a more efficient item, right? Instead of paying 440 gold for the passives, you're paying 417 gold for the passives. That feels fairly reasonable to me. Again, keep in mind, you're already, holding on to Balmy Cinder. You're upgrading the Balmy Cinder anyway. Now you're getting supercharged or, Snowbind or whatever. There you go. Let's get that, that name in there. But yeah, this now means that, you basically have this is all the same across all of your items, which again, I'm actually really prefer. I know I did a video a couple weeks ago about item design, and I was like, I'm not sure if it's really correct to have difference in armor and MR. I was leaning that I don't like it. Either way, now it's gone. And I'm honestly not sad about that. End of the day, people weren't buying, one thing that I think really was happening, right, is you get into a game and you're like, okay, I can only buy a Sunfire or Chem Tank because I'm against Vladimir. I will never go Frostfire Gauntlet because I'm landing against Vladimir. So it is never an option. I will never buy Frostfire Gauntlet. So now I only have two options. I have Sunfire and Chem Tank. We go to a different game. All right, I'm against Renekton. I will never buy Chem Tank. I can only buy Sunfire or Frostfire, and I'll buy nothing else. So you only ever really had two mythic options because you would just not buy the third one if the stat profile wasn't there. That's what ended up happening with player behavior. As far as I could tell, it's what ended up happening. So in this case, they've now removed that constraint, right? So now it's like, oh, I have all three on the menu once again. I can now choose among the three. Okay, that's helpful. That's a good thing. And it's like, look, I can get the exact same stats, aside from better Sunfire burn, for 400 less gold and buy a different item instead, right? Build an extra Ruby Crystal, build towards my Bramble Vest, or, pay off the Bramble Vest because I had to buy it first because it's Fiora. This opens up some really interesting choice structure. It is kind of interesting, the fact that this is now the only real mythic class in the game that has a price tiering difference, which is, definitely, it's unique, right? But I honestly don't hate it because keep in mind, Sunfire's entire shtick is I'm going to stat check you and we're going to fight. And it's like, okay, I can pay more money to say, let's stat check and fight, or I can pay less money, go buy some team utility and just buy some other stuff. I think in this case, it really works. I think if you're a marksman, a cheap mythic doesn't make a lot of sense. Okay, Shield Bow could kind of, because it's like, I'm just dying, let me buy something and live. It kind of could exist in that world, but I would not want to go down this rabbit hole. I'm such a fan of the mythics having the exact same cost, aside from Trinity Force for flavor reasons, costing 33 or more gold than other items. I'm a really big fan of the cost the exact same. This is the one place where I think it can make sense. It also does what they wanted to do initially, right? It's why these items cost less than the other mythics that are 33, 3400 gold, because they wanted the abilities for tank supports to buy these. And now that they're 2,800 gold, and things like Shrelia's cost 25, right? It's only a 300 gold jump to say, well, instead of Shrelia's, I can just go Chem Tank. And now that you kind of made Shrelia's not my item, and look at old Shrelia's, right? Compare old Shrelia's to new Chem Tank, and you're like, which one would you rather have anyway? Imagine you do want to engage on Nautilus. Which would you rather have, right? Okay, sure, the 5% move speed is nice, on Shrelia's, but it's same health, same haste, 25 more armor and MR. And it's all tank supports got buffed by this because they actually want to buy Chem Tank and they had nothing to buy otherwise. They had to go Locket. Now the price difference between Locket and Chem Tank is 300. That's reasonable. That is totally an acceptable price difference that you can get yourself to. That is an acceptable number, right? Well done, Riot. Well done to the designer who reshaped these. I absolutely love these changes. This is a really, really good job, in my opinion anyway, at least. But I think it actually is a good job. So here is the Ravenous Hunter nerf from 1.2% to 1 plus 1.7%. At no stacks, it's identical. And then it's nerfed. The fact that it's immediately 10% weaker at one stack is pretty solid. I still kind of think Ravenous Hunter doesn't have a place in League of Legends. I think massive self-sustain is a price that people should have to opt into. I feel the same way about mana and mana regen, by the way. I think fundamentally changing a resource allocation needs to have a price. And that price cannot be one rune. The price of a rune is so low. It just really is. Keep in mind, that these are runes that compete with things like Legend Alacrity, and Legend Alacrity, I think, like, caps out at 18% attack speed. So 450 gold is the price of a rune, really. You know, scaling up to 450 is the price of a rune. Like, that is cheap, right? But, you know, compare the price of Riftmaker versus, you know, Liandry's. It's like, okay, if I want to go Riftmaker so I have sustain, I can't get Liandry's burn. This is a significant decision I have to make. Like, this is a powerful decision that I care about. Do I need to drain tank? Yes, no. Well, I have the option for it. Is it worth it? And there's an argument that you could make that certain classes need sustain to work. Add spell vamp to a passive on their ultimate. I don't care, right? Like, I personally, and this is, I don't know, this goes down a rabbit hole, and I don't want to go down it too long, and there's a really good chance that I'm wrong here, but, like, you can't even buy this stat in League of Legends. Like, literally, you can go Ravenous Hunter, and if you're singed, sorry, not Ravenous Hunter, Ravenous Hydra. If you're singed, you can go Ravenous Hydra. Good luck buying that. It's an attack damage item with, you know, on auto attack buffs. Like, sorry, singed, it's Riftmaker or nothing, you know? And I don't know, like, that's where the choice should be to me, not buy this rune, cool, you work now, bye, have fun. You just, I don't know. I just, it doesn't sit well with me that Ravenous Hunter lives here when it is a stat that's on the tier of a unique passive, right? It's on the same tier as Gale Force. Like, imagine you got a rune that was like your 3rd in precision and it's just Gale Force active. Does that feel fair to you in any way at all? Of course not. No. Like, we're all just Zoe now. We're just, like, picking up active items in our rune pages. Like, I just really disagree with things that are so difficult to get to existing here, right? Like, I'm fine with, you know, the out-of-combat move speed. I don't know why, because, you know, you actually have to opt into going boots and mobies and whatnot. And Ultimate Hunter is at least, like, its own thing that's, like, actually unique. But, I don't know. Again, I don't want to spend too long on this one. We're going to move on. There's probably better thoughts, you know, like a better way to put these thoughts out at some other point in time, but I'm not a fan of Ravenous Hunter even existing as a rune. Regardless, though, honestly, pretty reasonable nerf. It's going to affect it. So cool beans. Alrighty, that is it for the patch rundown. We'll do a very quick TLDR. Shouldn't be too tough to get through. Akali, up to 20 energy off the Q, 20 energy back onto the Q is going to be pretty meaningful nerf. Azir gets 1 second on his Q cooldown is going to be nice to look at. Caitlyn getting about 4.4 AD per level means very, very little, shouldn't mean much. Darius getting less attack damage when a full stacked passive is on. This mostly affects his ultimate dunk. It's a pretty small nerf, but it's gonna be effective. Dr. Mundo is getting a big buff to his E, and by the way, everyone, you should be maxing E first in pretty much all matchups, and then all scenarios. Max E first, it's very good. Elise, Venomous Bite, losing 20 damage is actually fairly meaningful. This is going to be a solid win rate nerf here. Ivern never actually got the shield ratio nerf. It's now happening. Good change. Leblanc gets 5 more health per level and up to 20 mana off her Q. So a mid to late game buff for Leblanc, a fairly small one. Pretty solid stuff. Good stuff here. Maokai mostly is losing the fact that the mana cost is going up in Sapling Toss and a nerf to Imperial Mandate is going to affect Maokai. This is basically not a patch note. Nocturne getting 2 seconds off the Q and 10 seconds off the R is pretty meaningful, pretty big deal. Nocturne should be in a good spot. Nunu probably still going to be overtuned, but loses 5 boost speed, loses 30 health. Still going to be quite strong, but good to see some nerfs. Atrox is getting a fairly meaningful nerf to World Ender's overall healing gain to the tune of 13 to 20% total healing input, all things considered. Umbral Dash essentially is nerfed less than this. It's still nerfed compared to pre-patch, but nerfed a little bit less than this. Olaf overall is going to be a nerf, but hey, more lifesteal, less healing amp. I'm kind of glad to see less global healing amp. Honestly, the like Gore Drinker, XD full health just feels kind of bad. This is still what these guys are going to be buying more often than not, but the lower this kind of stuff goes, the more you actually have options in your mythic. Senna gets a very, very large buff. This is a very big deal for attack speed scaling. If you ever want to buy your Rapid Fire Cannon or Zerker Greaves, or even just leveling up to get attack speed, support Senna gets a lot more souls, and those souls give her more gold, so support Senna is going to be a lot richer. Higher ratios are going to feel pretty good. I mean, this is just like a straight buff, which is a big deal. Senna's going to be in a really good spot next patch. She's going to be very strong at support and very strong at AD carry. 10 more damage on backstab for Shaco. Pretty small, but going to feel kind of nice. Soraka is going to gain a lot more healing, 0 to 20 on Q on an enemy champion, and a flat 10 on W plus 10% AP ratio on W. Soraka's wave clear, I believe, is still pretty bad, and so ultimately it's probably not going to be a good solo laner, but is going to be a very good bot lane farm and a solid support as well. Trundle getting some nice damage on Q. You should be maxing E second on Trundle, especially now that you get a flat 10% attack speed regardless of W rank. You have even less incentive to rank W. Max Pillar second. Trundle will be roughly balanced with these buffs. Varus definitely needs a little bit more help. Good mana growth buff, a pretty solid 20, 10, 0 seconds cooldown in buff on the R. That's going to be pretty solid. Varus should be towing 50% pretty closely now, which is a good thing. Good job, Varus. Zoe can't take Redemption, but now has a bunch of new items to grab. Good changes. Essence Reaver is going to restore like 2 to 3 times as much mana as before, which is a really big deal. Instead of max mana, it's a bunch of like an AD calculation, and it's like 2 to 3x of the old numbers. Really, 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 really big buff. Gale Force, 30 seconds added back to the cooldown. Good nerf. Rocket Belt, less move speed. Good nerf. Mandate now goes on cooldown on the application, so Mandate Ashe and stuff is going to be a lot weaker. Mandate Cassiopeia going to be a lot weaker. Kraken Slayer now properly reduces damage on Aphelios, Katarina, Urgot. Good changes there. Shirelia's is no longer a tank item, but is now a very, very efficient enchanter item. Really consider Shirelia's. It's quite good now. Stone Plate slightly stronger. Lethality items very slightly buffed. 200 gold less for 5 less AD is a buff. So a buff to Serpent's Fang, buff to Umbral Glaive, slight nerf to Chainsword, but whatever. Marksmen are getting 5% more attack speed for the cost of 100 gold. For 300 gold, you can get 12 attack speed. So getting 5 for 100 seems pretty good. So small buff to Phantom Dancer, small buff to Reavenous Hurricane. Tank Mythics, Sunfire now has Tenacity on it instead of Ability Haste. Okay, that's fine, whatever. The big change is that Frostfire Gauntlet and Turbo Chem Tank cost 400 less gold. They have the same haste as Aegis, but they now have 25 armor MR flat instead of random scaling value. Which means as a top laner, you can now pick across all three because they have the same stat profile. You either choose a cheaper team fight focused one or the more expensive Sunfire Aegis with better dueling potential. It also means that support tanks, since they no longer can really buy Shirelia's, wherever it is, can now pretty easily spend 300 more gold than Locket and just get a Chem Tank or a Frostfire Gauntlet. I'm a very big fan of these changes. I like them a lot. Ravenous Hunter, nerfed by 10% with 1 stack, down to about 15% with max stacks. Good change. And that's the patch. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.